Okay, in today's lesson, we're going to talk about multiplication of fractions. Okay, so say for example we have the number 1/2 times 1/4, right? When we want to multiply fractions, what we do is we take the numerator, which is 1, right? And we multiply the top part, the numerators together, and then we multiply the denominators together. So 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 4 is 8, right? This is the answer to a multiplication problem, right? Let's do another example. Let's do 1/2 times 1/3. 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 3 is 6, right? Let's do another example. 1/4 times 1/3. 1 times 1 is 1, 4 times 3 is 12, right? But why is it 1/8? Why is it 1/6 and why is it 1/12, right? Okay, so let's explain why is that. If we were to draw this out, right? Let's say we said, okay, I want to draw out 1/2 times 1/4, right? So let's say we have this little box, right? And let's say we cut it into 4s, right? And we shade it. Right? This is 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, right? Which is 1. So all of them together is 1, right? Okay. Now let's say we took that little 1/4, right? And then we cut it in half, right? Remember, this is 1/4. So if we did that for every, let me get another pencil. If we did that for every square in this 1/4, right? Like if we did it again, right? This would give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So if we have this 1/4, this little 1/4, and we shade this little 1/4, this is 1/8 and 1/8, right? So they said, what is 1/2 of 1? Well, this is 1/2 of 1/4, and 1/2 of 1/4 is 1/8. So that's why it's 1/8. You see what I'm saying? What we did here is that we took the whole, right? We cut it into 4s, and then we took out 1/4 of it, and then we cut that in half, and that makes it 1/8. Okay, let's do the same thing. We do the same thing here. Let's draw this one out. Let's say we have this is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, right? We shade this 1/3. We shade this 1/3, right? So we're gonna shade this 1/3. Right? All right, we take out the 1/3, right? So this is 1/3, right? Then we cut it. We cut it in half, right? So this is 1/6 and 1/6. Why is this 1/6? Because if we did the same thing, let's say we did the same thing here, right? We cut it. This will give us 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6. These are the 6 pieces, right? So 1/2 of 1/3 is 1/6, because we took the whole, we cut it into 3 pieces, we took out that 1/3, and then we cut that one in half. This gives us 1/6, okay? We're gonna do this one. What is 1/4 times 1/3, okay? Let's do the same thing. We cut it into thirds, right? This is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, right? Okay. We shade 1/3. Remember, this is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, right? So we shade out 1/3. I don't have my crayons with me. Should have my little crayons. My little crayons. Crayons. Right? Right? So we do 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, right? We take out this 1/3. Right? Then we cut this in four. We cut this into fours, right? We cut this into fours. So we want to take it. And we're going to cut it into fours. Remember, this is 1/3, right? This is 1/3. So we cut it into fours, right? So this then becomes 1/12, 1/12, 1/12, 1/12. Now what's 1/12 plus 1/12 plus 1/12 plus 1/12? Well, 1/12 is 4/12, which is 1/3 when you reduce it, right? So this section here is 1/12. This section here is 1/12. Right? Because 1/12, 1/12, 1/12, 1/12 is 4/12, which is 1/3. Right? Because 1/12, 1/12, 1/12, 1/12 is 4/12, which is 1/3. Right? So it's the same thing. If we took this and we were to cut it into fourths, let's say we took it, boom, 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 and then we cut it again. We will have 12 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How many pieces are in that 1/3? 1, 2, 3, 4. You see what I'm saying? So if we took the 1/3, this is 1/3, and then we took a fourth of that 1/3, we will get 1/12 of the answer, and that's what gives it. But that's what makes it 1/12. Okay, so conceptually, right? Conceptually, when you multiply a fraction, what you're basically saying in your mind is, conceptually, what you're saying is, I'm cutting the piece. I'm cutting, like I have a little quilt, and I'm cutting the quilt. I have to cut it. You see what I'm saying? So that we get to the right answer, right? You're basically cutting. You're cutting. That's what you're doing when you're multiplying a fraction. You're cutting. That's the thing you're doing, right? So for that reason, that's why when you multiply the fractions together, that's why you have to multiply the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator, right? You multiply it without the drawing, you will multiply the numerator and the numerator together, and you'll multiply the denominator and the denominator together, and you will get 1/8. Okay, you will get 1/6, and you will get 1/12 when you multiply the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. Okay? The action of multiplying fractions is the action of cutting. It's like if you take a little, it's like when you are like, say like if you work as a fashion designer or something like that, and think of this like little square as like a quilt, and you're basically saying you take a little scissor and you're saying like, okay, if I have this little quilt, I have this little piece of clothing, and I have to cut it into, I'm like, for example, like example number 1, I have one section of a quilt. I have to cut it. I'm cutting it into fourths, and then I take that 1/4 again, and I'm cutting it in half. That's what you're saying when you are multiplying fractions. I have this little quilt of clothing. I'm sewing, right? I take this one quilt, I cut it into thirds. I'm cutting this quilt into thirds, and then I gotta cut that 1/3 again in half, right? example number 3, I have this clothing or quilt or whatever. I have to cut that quilt into thirds, right? And then I take 1/3 of that quilt and then I cut it again in fourths, right? That's what you're doing when you're multiplying fractions. You're cutting. That's the basic idea, right? So that's it for today. When you multiply fractions, you multiply the numerator by the numerator, you multiply the denominator by the denominator, and you'll get your answer. That's it. Bye-bye.